Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. My name is Frank Boston. I'm the creative director at Blur Studio. So 2.5 years ago, we began working on Secret Level. So it's a brand new animated anthology TV show, but this time, like Tim described it, based on video games. What a great idea. So when we started working on it, we started reaching out to all the vendors we worked with before, and Epic was one of them. And so they entrusted us with bringing back the world of Unreal Tournament in one episode to the small screens, but with one tiny condition. It had to be done entirely in Unreal Engine 5. And by that, I mean everything. So what you're going to see, the layout, the animation, the rendering, and more, everything had to be done in the engine. So today, while the show is not out yet, I'm still very excited to give you a sneak peek into what you'll be able to experience on December 10th on Amazon when Secret Level debuts. So we're going to shut the lights down and play.
In 2291, in an attempt to control violence among deep space miners, the New Earth government legalized no-holds-barred fighting. Leandro Mining Corporation, working with the NEG, established a series of leagues and bloody public exhibitions. The fight's popularity grew with their brutality. Soon, Leandro discovered that the public matches were the most profitable enterprise. The Professional League was formed. A cabal of the most violent and skilled warriors in known space selected to fight in a grand tournament.
All right, so to talk more about this, I'm not going to talk because I'm boring. So those guys, the real heroes, the guys behind all those images. So we have Devon Chiu, who's our UE tech director, Sachin Patekar, who's our rigging supervisor, Thierry Labelle, our animation supervisor on the show, and Jean-Baptiste Cambier, who's our CG soup. So you guys, take it away.
So hi again, I'm Devon Chiu, Unreal Tech Director at Blur Studio. I will give a very broad summary about our pipeline and tech development efforts during the making of the Unreal Tournament episode. And my colleagues will showcase some of the tools, assets, and workflows in more details later on in the presentation. Firstly, I want to talk about some of the challenges and goals we have for this Unreal pipeline. So firstly, the Unreal Tournament episode is in fact the very first Unreal production we have at Blur Studio, which means that we actually have to build a majority of the pipeline during production, while the tech art team was also being the only in-house technical guidance and lifeline to a production team that has very little Unreal experience prior to the beginning of this adventure. We want this episode to not only celebrate the legacy of Unreal Tournament, but also showcase Unreal Engine 5 as a linear production package, which means that we want to always stay on the latest Unreal Engine version as soon as possible in order to leverage some of the cutting-edge features that were still experimental during production. But like Frank said, we also want to do as much, if not everything, directly in Engine. We have a pretty small team of 3 TA generalists and 0 dedicated developers versus a production team of 56 artists. In total, for the episode, we have 553 shots, and with countless throwaway layout assets exist in the same project, so we really need to come up with a strategy so that we can manage and organize our project beyond simple folder structures. So yeah, just a quick head count of the team with the Unreal talents marked in orange at the beginning of the production. So yeah, no sweat, right? So with our goals established for the pipeline, here are some principles that help guide us our tech development efforts during the making of this episode. So since we always want to stay on the latest Unreal Engine version, and we simply don't have the capacity to maintain our own branch of the source, we simply don't modify engine code, and we just work with everything out of the box. And if we need to extend the engine, we just extend it through plugins. While developing the pipeline was a challenge we had to overcome. While we're developing the pipeline to production was a challenge we had to overcome. We also benefited from being able to take in immediate feedback from our production team and iterate our tools on the fly. Besides existing tools, we migrated over from our conventional pipeline. All the new tools we developed for our Unreal pipeline were mostly made in blueprints, supported by our Python script if we need to import our own Python stack, and only in C++ if we have to. Of course, with limited resource and time, we really need to pick our battles. And so more effort than other productions were spent on really helping the team to adopt the editor instead of reinventing the wheel. We don't really impose a strict optimization targets in the editor, but try our best to provide best practices to guide our team. And we only do targeted optimization to our shot data upon request. We also want this pipeline to be future-proof, not just a bespoke one only for the show. So, for example, we opt to do a content plugin-based project structure to organize our Unreal assets and shot data. We also extend movie render pipeline so that we can toggle between multiple render executors. So in the future, we could have a collaboration and have a joint production with other studios for even bigger shows. Just a quick overview of our project structure. So with help from Epic, we're able to extend the existing asset referencing rule sets to establish a more sophisticated project content plugin referencing structures. For example, for all our visual elements, be it like the characters, props, vehicles, environment, we organize them into individual entity plugins. As for layouts in Unreal Engine, since our layout team authors our layout cameras and shot options in groups, we create separate layout plugins per each of our layout groups. After our initial layout edits, we export it out OTIO and use it to promote and duplicate our layout shots into individual production shots. Each, of course, also stored in its own shot plugins. And this structure really helped us by preventing unintentional cross-referencings between disciplines, and it also help us by separating our shot data from one another. And then furthermore, it also helps us transport our master assets to future productions with ease. So I'm gonna pass it to Sachin, our rigging supervisor, to talk about assets and rigging.
Sorry. So this is Sachin, I'm rigging supervisor here at Blur Studios. And this was kind of a challenging thing, what we came up to, rigging stuff in Unreal. So control rig was kind of a new thing. We wanted to experience that and start our rigging process. So what we decided is to go with what we already have. So Unreal had MetaHuman rigs in it. So we decided to go ahead with that and start that as a foundation of our rigs and keep moving with that, edit and stuff. So we decided to go with that. And so what we did, we built all our assets in MetaHuman, like the base foundation rig system as MetaHuman, and created that and started to edit. So we created a driver system inside Maya, which can drive our MetaHuman rigs. So we can test out our rigs correctly, check everything is working fine in terms of skinning, adding modules to our rigs and stuff. So those were like pre-checked in Maya in terms of their working. And then we created export tools like this, which can export our rigs as it is inside Unreal. So we were testing stuff in Maya and then pushing that back to Unreal, so we know it's matching one-to-one, so our rigs are perfect. So there are like export tools, there are like URBF what we use to drive volumetric joints and everything, so the volumes are quite maintained. We did not use any corrective shapes or any other kind of mesh-driven blend shapes or anything like that. So those are like pure skin-based systems. So it stays lighter on the engine and we are not like hogging any memories for anything like that. And we had to develop like a lot of custom modules like stretches, pistons, spine, and curves and twists and stuff like that, just to make everything workable correctly for animation needs, because it was like a 15 minutes of overall length piece and we had a lot of variations and stuff. So we had to maintain everything. So that was the goal. So you can see how it's working inside Maya, and then we can replicate that in Unreal. That was the goal, and we managed to achieve that. The next thing is the face. So we had to take a really good decision. How do we do the faces inside Unreal? So we were discussing about doing something custom and get our Maya rigs to port it back into Unreal, but at the same moment, Unreal dropped Mesh to MetaHuman, and that made us so happy. So because that saved a lot of time for us. But as you guys can see, right, it loses a lot of details. So we had like really deep sculpts and stuff. And when you convert that to MetaHuman, it loses most of stuff. But the volumes are correct. So what we did, we started from there. We start to get those meshes back inside ZBrush, and we sculpted that back and got all the details on the model and converted that to maps and everything. And if you see in the second image there, we managed to get the base shape updated, and there are a lot of small things added there, which you cannot see here, but yeah, the maps, normal maps, everything got baked, and we got closer to our initial designs. And yeah, that was really good thing. And then we updated the wrinkle maps as well to add more fidelity to the rigs and getting closer to the performance what we needed. And we use, you can see the standard like a stress test what we did, try to get how far we can push the rigs and do things with it. This is the standard process of updating wrinkle maps, what we used on all our characters. So exporting like 6 combo shapes out of the MetaHuman rig, and then converting that back to sculpted maps, which are baked through like 3 maps into a diffuse and normal things. And then there are like around, I don't know, 24 masks or something, which are driving that inside a MetaHuman face shader, which was handling all that stuff in the background. So yeah, this is done for all the characters just to get that everything back. Yeah, and then we came to handling a blueprint. So blueprint was kind of our asset assembly thing. So from the things what we exported from Maya were like bits and pieces, like all the objects were in pieces, and all the skeletal mesh were divided into multiple parts because we wanted to do a lot of variations for the character, and we don't wanted to create like independent blueprint for each shot or anything like that. So we went ahead and assembled everything inside blueprint, and we used all like transformable objects as nanites, so we can maintain the low, like high frame rate of the shots and not use like skeletal meshes everywhere. So you have seen the robots, that's like all nanite. So those are like all bits and pieces just assembled into a blueprint. And we developed a lot of custom functions for handling variations across the blueprint, material variations, and then lights and all that stuff. So yeah, then the standard control rig. So we went with MetaHuman as a base and added so many custom modules to it, like for stretches and everything like that. And our rigs were like shareable across the asset, and the functions we wrote also was shareable across the asset. So you can write a function for one character, make it global so we can use across different things and just keep it lighter. And also like we use animproc rigs, which are kind of automation, whatever you see in the character that was using animproc rig, which was getting driven by a blueprint. So without controller rig as well, you will have everything automated, like all pistons will working, all spines will working correctly, and nothing will look broken without baking stuff to control rig. Yeah, you can see like small details. We added all automations with pistons and like twist and stuff. Yeah. Yeah. This is kind of a new thing we tried. So this was the only character which was like non-human. And we decided, what do? We could have done like same MetaHuman kind of a structure to it. This was impossible to do with MetaHuman because of its anatomy, right? So what we did, we have our own facial driving system in Maya, which is called Simplex, which is owned by Blur and developed by our amazing developer, Tyler Fox. So he did that. So we managed to port it back in Unreal. So what it does, it just one node handles all the blend shapes and all the connection in betweens and like combo shapes and incremental shapes and everything. So we can get that back inside Unreal, get our sculpt inside and just drive it with one node. So this is kind of we used it as a sandbox to test it out, how this tool works, and that works like a charm. So that was also a successful test what we did. Yeah, let's talk about weapons. So there are a lot of weapons, different kind of weapon, and we wanted to make it easier for animation. So what we did, we rigged it passed it to animation to create cycles, and then Devin created the whole blueprint system for weapon to automate it. So with one click of a button, adding an event there, which will trigger animation sequence, which triggers effects, which triggers like a damage, depending on the surface what the target is hitting for. And I'll show you how the whole blueprint looks like. It was really complex setup, and which we use for all the systems, all the weapons. So for animation, it's just a matter of adding keys where they want to fire that event, and it goes like that. So yeah, this is all from my side. I'll pass it on to animation to take it further. Thank you.
Awesome. Is it working? Yes, awesome. Hey, I'm Terry. I'm the animation supervisor on the show. You know, sometimes you try some new tech and you're like, man, this is the future. And this to me happened when I was working on that shot, that test shot. And I showed it to Frank, and Frank was like, can you see that in your viewport? And I'm like, yes, I can animate with that. And it was amazing, right? I'm like, oh, this is the future. JB made it look a little bit better. My lighting wasn't as nice, but it was basically that. So, almost. Our team was very excited about working in Unreal, and we were the team that Devin was complaining about. So look at those newbies there. So we're not a game company, so we didn't know anything about Unreal except for a few people. And we knew even less about the control rig, so we found one freelancer who actually worked with the control rig. We started the project on 5.1, it just came out, so, you know. But we were an excited, interested team. We wanted a taste of that sweet, sweet viewport. Yeah, I work in Maya. It's you know, doesn't look like the other thing. So for us, not gonna lie, we felt like pioneers of a new frontier. It was daunting. Like, look at this guy; he's pretty daunted. But it was exciting. It was really cool. We were very bold about what we were going to do. We were in the project. It was built in. We were going to be we were not going to play it safe. We were going to try to use everything that came out. And our friends at Epic were very supportive, and they didn't force us, by the way, to do the animation in Unreal. They understood that the tools were new, but we were like, no, you know what? Being all in safe software is very exciting for us. So when I first started testing things with my lead, Ben, we quickly realized that the tech is completely amazing, but sometimes it's the front end for the user is a little bit more basic, right? So if you look at this very humble character picker, it sounds silly, but I knew that my animators, we have a pretty big team of 9 or 10 people. It's not huge, but this is very basic, and it works, by the way. You can absolutely use it. I was talking to someone who worked on Fortnite, and they're using it. But in our short, we have 5 characters versus 5. There's a lot of characters. So if every time you need to switch characters in your little character picker, and you go in a little drop down, and you select your little character, my life sucked big time at first, so I didn't really was a fan of just that, but we could have. So I had a friend in the rigging team, Guillaume. He was like, you know, I can port the synoptic, we call that a synoptic character picker, from Maya, so which we did. So this, I thought, would really help animators to transition from Maya, because it would be something a little bit more familiar. That's what we use in Maya, essentially. So if we could use it in Unreal without changing any of the functionality of Unreal, but just that little front thing. By the way, we were talking about potentially putting it on the marketplace if anyone is interested. Yeah, okay, cool, right? Awesome. Like, I could talk about it, I do stuff for an hour, right? It's my baby. It's a graphical interface also, so you can make it pretty, so it's nice. And you can see it selects, it auto-detect, we added variations and stuff, so it's really cool. I'm going to go back one quick second here because I want to talk about the team. So I'm representing for the layout team. The supervisor couldn't be here today. It's Justin Dunkel. His team did an amazing work. But we're two very different groups, right? So layout, those people are freaking amazing. They're like generalists. They can do everything. They do the staging. They do temp lighting, temp effects, temp everything. And it looks great at Blur. Those guys just jumped into Unreal. So vanilla Unreal, they didn't need anything. And I'm not saying that they didn't have faced issues. For sure they did. But they're very nimble. Our animation team, we're kind of a different breed, a little bit of people. We're not generalists, we're specialists. We're experts at one thing, and it's doing animation. So we knew that that team needed a little bit more support, potentially. What was exciting is that people were very willing to do it, actually, and I'm not just saying that. I asked people. I didn't want people on my team that be like, it's like being in Unreal is gonna suck, it's gonna be terrible. I wanted people that were excited about trying something new, and everyone was. And I'm talking about veterans, like a guy like Brian Hillstead, who's been at Blur for like 20 years. He was like, can I be part of that? I want to try it. So it was really exciting. But that's also why That's also why we needed to make their life a little bit easier. We tweaked the synoptic, the faceboard. That's another thing. Amazing tech. The facial rig in MetaHuman is really impressive. But to use it, you have to use the faceboard. Again, completely doable, by the way. We could have done it. But it's not super pleasant when the background is light and stuff like that. It's like, and you have different characters. It's a bit painful. Put that in a synoptic, suddenly, that's kind of much easier to use. We had our little poses, and it made things a little bit easier. We were lucky in animation. We had a little bit of time of pre-pro at the beginning, and we could work on stuff like that. All right, we worked on a lot of other tools, and it was stuff that it was been very cool because in 5.4, for example, they did put some stuff that, the number one thing people were asking my animators were, how can I filter my curves? We had a little tool to do that. We don't need it anymore in 5.4, it's there. We did a lot of stuff about baking stuff, IK-FK matching. It's not sexy things, but we were talking with the Epic people. We're like, is this possible? Is it a little button we didn't click somewhere? And they're like, no, it's not there right now, future. So we're okay, well, again, Guillaume, amazing guy, made little tools for us. Challenges, okay. So first of all, it's surprising, but it's not surprising. Of course, working in a live environment like that is tricky, right? So before version 5.4, constraints were in the level and not in the level sequencer. So it meant that we were checking out a lot of files, working on a lot of things. So when my friend Frank was like, hey, the animation you showed me 3 days ago, that's the one I want. I like it better than the one you're showing me now. Rollbacking was almost impossible because 5 different people worked on that same level, maybe a scene assembly guy, maybe different people, we would have lost all that work. So rollbacking and versioning was surprisingly difficult. I felt like it added a technical aspect that was very difficult for animators to deal with. It was unnerving a little bit to be like, oh, I have either my version, my local version, or the one that's checked that in, but that's it. And yeah, it was a little bit tricky. But the real challenge was because we were so bold and fearless, we tried everything. Beta plugins, stuff. Oh, sorry guys, it just crashed. I made that slide and my pressure went up. I'm just watching it. I'm like, oh my God, it's absolutely brutal. Okay? But I have to say, it was a mix of different things. We were using beta plugin. We're newbies. And on top of that, the biggest thing we we underestimated the hardware requirements. It's so dumb, right? But it's true. At Blur, we do boxes in a certain way that we've been doing them for 20 years, it works. And then suddenly, with real time, we had a bad batch of graphic cards. They melted. It was insane. And we had problems with power supplies. We had problems with everything that could have gone wrong, did go wrong. And it meant for animators, literally we kept like a little chart, like a daily chart of crashes. And some people, it was insane. And for some people, crashing two times in a day is a lot. I'm talking 25 times in a day, it's brutal. But we learned, and we got better. And I have a very, very patient team. And sometimes, people will say, how do you do that? That animation, like pure grit is the answer for sure, because it was the first generation of those tools. The success, I would say, I have a little takeaway for you guys. Training was really important, and we were kind of lucky because we were learning that software. So we didn't have like 20 years of experience with it. So we didn't assume that people would know this or that. We were kind of new to it. So we kept being like, hey, okay, this is what I don't understand. And I was doing research. I was talking to my Epic friends. And then I did training with Ben, my lead. And we would do 5 minutes training maximum. Okay, so that was the key. Nobody wants to watch an hour-long tech video about something, and then you have to scroll until, like, where's that little icon that I missed and that thing? It's horrible. So we did a lot of videos, but about one feature. So I was talking about curve filtering. Well, we have a little tool about that. Okay, a little 3-minute video to show exactly how it's done. You call it how to filter your curves. And it was searchable, and we put that on it's called the management learning system, like a little bit like Udemy, where it was like a little class. And it was really successful because at the end, we could probably onboard someone in 2 weeks. People were really ready to go. But they knew that. They didn't know blueprints, shading networks. All of what those guys are talking about is still Chinese to me. But we knew one thing, which was animation. The other big success is going to sound really dumb, but ultimately everyone was able to transition to Unreal. So when I hear that people say, the tools are not ready, it's not doable, well, it is doable. We absolutely did it. And not only that, but I would say my best guys in Maya, my best artists, were my best guys in Unreal also. And that to me was super inspiring. So we freaking did it. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Thierry. Well, thank you, Thierry. Actually, about the crashes you talked about, I think my team probably has a lot to do with it, because when those guys are starting animating, when we come in with all our lights and all our setups, then you have to animate again on top of it. And sorry, Thierry. And by the way, I made good use of your training videos as well, so thank you for that too. Our team is no exception. Assembly at Blur is a team of lighter, a team of compositor. We do part of environment modeling. Very few of them knew how to use the engine. And so we build ourselves together. And as Thierry mentioned, as Sachin mentioned, and Devon mentioned, I think it's an endeavor that everybody embraces. You want to get people on your team that are willing to go in there. And getting out of this project, a massive project, we were only a production, head of production knows the number of shots. You said 553. It's so many. So we have to go through that together. And at the end of the day, we loved what we did, and we enjoyed doing it. And to me, that is also one big success of the show. Fantastic team here. A lot of shots for very few people to light and render. But one of the best teams I've ever worked with. Because we have limited time to be together today, I wanted to focus on very specific points that I thought was important. We started the project on 5.0, 5.1 you said, and we are going to, up until 5.3. And because we are doing a show for Amazon, it's going to be shown widely, worldwide, we had to hit a quality that would respect the quality we've delivered in the past and more. And you have some roadblocks in this technology, and part of it is the depth of field. And I'm sure you have encountered it. But we found out that the only solution in some cases was to decompose into passes. But being in 5.3, we couldn't do that. We didn't have the movie render graph at the time. So we just built a render pass system at the time. Now, you would ask me, why would I talk about a render pass system if you already have MRG to play with? Well, I would say because I think what I'm going to show you is cool. But also because Sean Comley from Epic gave me 2 pieces of information that could be useful for you in other places. And finally, also to show you that in Unreal Engine, if you have not figured it out already, we can go through a whole VFX process, decomposing into passes, going to compositing if you need to. So I thought that was interesting. So the 2 elements that Sean gave me that made a difference is that you can trigger kinematic events. Once you click render in Movie Render Queue, you can fire kinematic events that would browse any events you have in your scene and fire them. And you can do a lot of stuff in there. You can move geometry around, you can create stuff, you can delete stuff, you can apply materials. And for most of that, it will only exist within the render. When the render finishes, your scene is back to the original, meaning you can do a lot of things. And once the render is done, it restores to the original. And the second key piece of information was that, and you would see, I mean, if you're like us and you train on Unreal material, you have this chain of events of what is calculated first, what is calculated last, and one of the last thing being calculating is word position offset, meaning that you get to be able to calculate your GI, your reflection, your shadows, and still do something with the word position offset. So what we did, we created a material function that you can see here on the left that basically, with the kinematic event, at some point is going to collapse all the geometries, hide them underground. But by the time it does that, all shadows have been calculated, GI and reflection for your frame, meaning that if you collapse a character with this method, you get a pass of environment with shadows of the characters, gold validation and reflection of the characters. Your character is not there. So suddenly you have an environment pass onto which you can render your character separately, put it on top. So that was what allowed us to leverage passes without having the movie render graph. What I'm going to show you is a scene made by one of my lighting lead, Ella. She's formidable, in which every video I'm going to show is accelerated. I'm sorry, I just needed to be able to fit it in the time we have. But that's going to show you the perspective of an artist using those passes. So here is a shot that we have. We decided to use layers so the display layers are actually going to be the different, and you can see here, the different thing that you would like to decompose in your shot, the thing that you think you're going to treat differently. So we separated characters into their own layers, environment, foreground in their own layers. Now here, everything is done by Blueprint, by the way. That system we built is fully Blueprint, fully native. And then we built that with Devon, and Devon put that under amphetamine, improved it, optimized it, and he made it 10 times user-friendly than my first version that I made. So here, you type the area pass, you basically tell which layer you want in there. We can do default pass, which is basically any pass you want that's detached from anything else. You can do a fog pass that just render your fog separately. We can do alpha passes that just gonna do an override of materials on your pass. And in Movie Render Queue, you just duplicate, put the names, hit renders. Those frames, I'm only calculating 5 frames just to go fast, and I'm cutting through render time. So this is not true to the actual time it takes, but at least it will show you what the passes look like when we render them. So this really was to go around having issues with depth of field, having clean edges, especially with hair. And I'm going to show you the nuke part right after that. We're going to go fast on that. On the project, everything is done with Lumen. Everything is done in engine. We are doing, because of this technicality, passes that we composite in Nuke. We're doing optics in Nuke, meaning how can I say, distortion, flares, glows, because obviously if you decompose into passes, you want to be able to relayer them on top, and DI in the end, but really minimal comp, and yeah. So that's a glance of how we went around that. Don't do your own random pass system, use a movie on the graph. It's going to be way better, way more solid. But that gets us, thanks Sean, by the way, I think he's in the room. Thanks to him, we were able to use passes before we have the movie on the graph. Next, what I'm going to show you is a few snippets that allowed us to create scenography in Unreal, some lighting aspects that I thought you would find cool. Frank, our creative director, you met him a bit earlier, we always get into the meetings and he always comes with those amazing references. And I'm in those meetings and we discuss about those and sometimes he fires stuff at you and you're like, but in your head, you have a little sweat drop on the temple and you're like, I have no idea how I'm going to do this. So we got to work. And here is one of the aspects that I thought was interesting. We created a hologram, but when I was asking around how you guys make holograms in Unreal and looking at the marketplace, people are saying we use some specific materials. But every time we do something new like this, we were thinking, how can we make it better or something that people are not necessarily used to see? And so we came up with a solution where we have an asset, we shoot it with 3 cameras, we sample the z-depths, we invert the d-depths, and we use wet position offset to push that z-depth with 3 different angles, 3 different planes. So what you see here is actually a plane, very subdivided. Every face is detached and put in space like this. The good aspect of that is that when Thierry and his team are in the scene, they can animate the characters and they have this big hologram next to it and they'll animate the facial live, they have the feedback live. And we have a few options here to see what we're doing, to customize, to change the look a tiny bit. I thought that was an interesting thing to show you is that sometimes, I mean, at least we're trying, just to trying to bring something on the table that maybe people are not used to see. I'm not saying we invented that tech. I'm sure people played with it, but I feel like it was a successful part of the little treats, technical treats and beautiful treats. We also made it so that we can rotate it, scale it, move it in every direction. So it becomes basically a set dressing element. In the intro you saw earlier, there are a few of them in the show, and you're going to see that in now. You do have the hologram featured as part of the storytelling. Thought that was interesting. And the last thing that I'm going to show you is a few snippets of blueprints that we've made to create the live show. We have a huge arena where we need to bring life, we need to make it eventful, and we need to fill a lot of space. So Frank came out with wonderful ideas. We watched a lot of references, and here are a few of them. So commercial blueprints, we work with a very good designer called Evgeny. He's working with us on a lot of shows, providing us with some nice designs. So those commercials are actually from the game, of course. So creating blueprints where you can just, we standardized, you can use sequences, drag them. We used some strobes, and here you can see a sample of our crowd. So you can manipulate strobes, change the colors, and do a bunch of stuff with this really giving life, having the control of the scene assembler and the lighter, because at this stage, it's halfway between animation and lighting to some degree, and the real time really helped us. Okay, you can see what you're doing. It's so challenging to do that in a standard workflow. Here, a little snippet on the crowd. We divided all the stadium between sections, oh, it's a bit dark, but okay, yeah, great. We did a crowd in Niagara. And you remember this story about Mr. George Lucas doing the episode 1 with the pod racer race, where they actually use Q-tips to animate the crowd. So keeping that in mind, we were like, we want some life and want some stuff moving and being bright in the crowd. And we're like, why don't we just turn on fully illuminated heads when we are far? And when we're closer, why don't we just turn the hands self-illuminated so that every time they move, you actually see life in there? I thought that was interesting to try to absorb this mentality of how can we make this, how we can be clever about it without using too much memory and all of this. So those last 3 shots you saw was trying to employ some of those techniques. This, I think you may find it useful. Because we actually took a long time to find the right set of CVARs that we could. By all means, if you want to take pictures, do it. Of course, Sean and Michael helped us figure that out, but it took us a long time. Just a little caveat, 124 as samples. The reason why we're on 24 is because when we are using and we are rendering our shots with cameras, and for motion blur, we use frame close. So even number, if you were using either centered, if you were using centered, you would rather go to 23 or 25. And then from there, that's our base settings. It really, sincerely, did 95%, it covered 95% of our cases. Now, after that, you have fast-moving objects. Go to 48. You have very fast-moving objects. Go to 64 if you need to eliminate your steps. And of course, the last 5s here, if you don't have hair in your scene, you don't need those, obviously. Those are a bit hardcore settings, so don't hesitate to lower them down. Anyways, if that is helpful to you, I'm happy. Well, it's been a journey. It's been a big collaboration between Epic and Blur. Thank you to the Epic team, because not only they were available, they were extremely patient with us. They know the software, obviously. And maybe you don't know, but most of them are actually worked on movies that you grew up with and you've enjoyed. And on top of that, they are extremely nice people. So thank you to them, sincerely. And I wanted to conclude by saying that, and Thierry mentioned it, Sachin mentioned it, and Devon mentioned it too, the human aspect in this journey is essential. I think binding the team around a common goal and thriving together to give our best really make the difference on the pixel. So we really try to give a lot of room to the artist and accompany them and listen to them. And everybody had their word to say on the show, and I think it made a huge difference. Instead of having this big mechanic of those shows where we are taken by time and everything has to go fast, organizing yourself around the artist, I think made a big difference. Thank you, Frank. You've been a fantastic director. Devon, Sachin, Thierry, thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. And it's really humbling to be with you today. Thank you.